it is really something that it is not due to other things besides configuration, because the challenge in doing bandwidth management configuration is that some administrator often overlook what is the direction of the traffic, where in fact in the proxy the configuration needs to be done. So for example, when you create a policy, so if you try to create, the first thing first is, of course, we need to create a bandwidth management class. Okay, so after you created a bandwidth management class, you have to use this in the policy, right? So when you use this in a policy, like so here, let's add one more layer. Okay, and let's just reorder this layer. Okay, and move this all the way up. All right. So when you right-click and set your bandwidth management policy, new, manage bandwidth. So over here, you need to select the bandwidth class that you have created earlier. All right, so let's say you're going to use this bandwidth class, right, that you have created earlier. Now this is where the problem comes, right? Because when the configuration is set in a policy, what happens is you will be asked to find, or you'll be asked in the configuration, where do you want to limit the bandwidth on? All right. So for example, you can limit the bandwidth client side inbound. So typically this is where the confusion comes, right? Because some administrators may be confused about, when you say client side inbound, what does it mean? So what does it mean? So first of all, the reference is the proxy. All right? So when you say client side inbound, when you reference the proxy, this means to say it is the traffic from the client to the proxy, because it is inbound to the proxy. Right? That is the interpretation of the proxy. While the server inbound, right, the server inbound, this is the traffic from the server to the proxy. Okay? And the client side outbound, this is the traffic from the proxy to the client. And the server side outbound is the traffic from the proxy to the OCS or the server. So if you are going to manage bandwidth, right, let's say you wanted to limit the bandwidth from people who try to download from the internet. So which of the selection here you are going to check? Right. So if it is downloading from the internet, so the reference is the proxy, so it should be server side inbound, because when you download, what you want to limit is the bandwidth between the server and the proxy. So it is the server side inbound. Okay? You can also limit the client side inbound, which is, client side outbound, which is the traffic from the proxy to the client, but this is typically in the LAN already. But you can also use this if, for example, you have a proxy and the client is on the WAN, then you can also use this feature. So this is quite often the issue with bandwidth management, because the user noticed that they created a bandwidth management class and referenced in a policy, but then it seems that it is not getting applied. So the reason for that is because they get confused about which one they would select. So typically for downloading, they would say that it is the client side outbound. All right. Now there are policy trace will show you if what policy is getting triggered, right? We know this already. And the policy trace, since there is a transaction timing in the policy trace, you can actually find out via transaction timing if your bandwidth management is actually taking effect, because the transaction time is very high. Okay, the transaction time is very high. That is because the proxy is trying to squeeze the bandwidth. So if you think that it seems that your bandwidth is not getting managed by the proxy, send the traffic to your existing policy. Look if the traffic is getting matched, right? The policy is getting matched. If the policy is getting matched, take a look at the transaction timing. If the transaction timing is correct, means to say that it is high, obviously, because the proxy is squeezing it, then that is an indicative that your bandwidth management policy is working for you. Okay? All right. Now, another topic I'm going to talk about are the external dependencies. So proxy on its own could not function. Okay? So proxy definitely need a DNS server to function, right? Likewise, the proxy may also need an authentication server if authentication is enabled. Okay? So with that, you have to pay attention with what are the different external dependencies that the proxy is configured in order to satisfy the traffic. Likewise, if you have turned on ICAP, Internet Content Adaptation Protocol, and you're connecting it to a content analysis server, then you will also see, or you also need to take your ICAP server into consideration. So in this case, here we're looking at the authentication server. So we'll look into a bit more details with this later on, but basically when you deal with authentication, troubleshooting, there are several things that you need to make sure you collected. So one, of course, is how is my authentication RAM configured? What is my authentication server? Okay, am I using Active Directory or Radius or other authentication server? Now, if you're using Active Directory, how am I connected to it? Am I connected to it directly, or I'm using an agent? Okay. Another is, what is the authentication credential I'm using? Am I using Kerberos or an TLM? Okay. So with that, I expect to see what surrogate. Okay. So those are the things that you need to ask yourself when you do with authentication. You deal with authentication issues. Likewise, the proxy also performs health checks. So the authentication server, when you add it, is part of the automatic health check that the proxy will perform. So as you can see, so when you have authentication enabled, if you look at the health check, so the server is getting checked by the proxy. Okay? So that is what the proxy is doing. Okay? Likewise, we have a health check statistics that we can take a look at this as well. Okay? So what are you going to check if you want to find out if the proxy is connecting to the server properly? So of course you have the response time. Okay, and actually several others which I'm going to show you later on. Another is the proxy is dependent to a DNS server, right? It is an important component in a proxy environment because it is the web traffic, so the proxy needs to access to the DNS server to check for the IP address of the host. So if there are any issue with the DNS, such as latency, means the DNS is slowing down, then you would expect to see the same case in the proxy. Because the proxy performs DNS caching, these are some of the potential things that could happen. So let's say the DNS or the OCS has changed the IP address and the cache were not updated yet. That is a potential issue. All right? And likewise, what if the user is using IP address to connect to the DNS to an OCS? When you use IP address, basically the proxy will do reverse DNS lookup. All right? So with that, the proxy or the DNS server that the proxy is connected to must respond with the reverse DNS lookup. Otherwise, things will fail. All right? So we'll look into a bit more on that later on. Now, besides that is your ICAP server. Okay? So where do we use the ICAP server? So basically, this feature is used especially if you are using content analysis over here. So with content analysis, you can configure your proxy to connect to an external server. It could be a content analysis, also known as the threat protection devices, or it could be a DLP, or it could be other servers, right? So now, because this is configured, such as, for example, threat protection, depends on the modification that's going to happen, right? Request or response. So in this case, you have response modification, which means to say that any traffic from the server that responds back to the proxy first, the proxy needs to send it to the threat protection server because it is response modification. So when the proxy sends it to the external server, a threat protection server, for evaluation of, let's say, threats such as malware, the proxy must wait for the response coming from that server. Okay? If for some reason that server is down or maybe slowing, then it will also ripple the issue back to the proxy, because the proxy will not send the traffic back to the user unless your threat protection server is responding in a timely manner, right? Or unless it responded back to the proxy already. Okay, so that is another dependency that potentially could happen if the proxy is in fact connected to those servers. Okay, so that is why it is really very important to understand what are how the proxy is deployed, where is the proxy connected to, what are the dependencies that the proxy have, because all of that dictates with regards to performance eventually. Okay. So next I'm going to talk about this topic, which is SSL interception. So I think you all would agree that SSL is a very, very common SSL, or also HTTPS. When I say SSL, I mean to say HTTPS because we talk about web traffic. So SSL is one of the very common protocol now used to access the internet. I think more than 70% or maybe about 90% of web traffic is now SSL, right? So with that, think about what are the different issues that could happen with regards to SSL. Now, as what we see in the field, there are two very common issues with regards to SSL. It's only about not able to connect to the website or problem connecting to some of the websites. Another is performance issue. So these two issues are very common with regards to SSL. Connection problems, because not all websites are the same. Okay, so some websites might require different ciphers, different size of key. right? Or different version of TLS, or maybe a browser are using older version, and that might fail. So connection problem is one of the common issues. Another issue with regards to SSL is performance issue, all right? Because not all websites are the same. So some websites might be using different ciphers. Some website might be using different technique to decrypt traffic, and it might create performance issues. So that is another common issue with regards to SSL interception. So next is the web filtering, okay? So this web filtering is another feature that is almost always turned on in Proxy, all right? And few things that could also go wrong with web filtering, because web filtering enables the administrator to create policy based on several databases that we support, such as your content analysis, your content filtering using category, your threat risk level based on the risk level of the website or URL, your geolocation, right? So all those are part of your content filtering. So before the proxy could apply them, there should first be a service that is set to intercept. And that is a starting point, right? If you think that your policy is not getting applied, the first thing to look at is whether you have a service, okay? So what would go wrong with content filtering? So if, let's say, there is no service that is set to intercept, then obviously no traffic will be sent to the proxy to apply policy, okay? And likewise, maybe wrong configuration at the first place, or wrong policy creation. Okay, so those are the things that could potentially happen with web filtering, or maybe your content filtering license expired. So you're using content filter database, your license expired, so highly likely you will not be able to have access to the internet. Okay, so next up I'm going to talk about the sysinfo. So over here we will look deep into sysinfo. It's just that end user do not have a tools that can use to examine thoroughly the sysinfo. But what you have are, basically you need to use manual inspection to inspect the sysinfo. So we're gonna do that. Our support do have some tools in order to crunch the content of the sysinfo to give them a bit more easy and graphical user interface. So, but then again, without using the tool, you can in fact just examine the sysinfo as long as you know what you're looking for, all right? So I'm going to show you things that are very, very important, or things or information inside the sysinfo that can easily be identified, and what are the different information that is available inside the sysinfo for the administrator, especially if you are trying to do troubleshooting or just basically trying to understand your proxy. So this is the same slide that you saw on the advanced, whereby you can invoke sysinfo in 3 different ways: /sysinfo, text, and HTML. So as an administrator who will examine it manually, I recommend you to use the text version rather than the /sysinfo itself, because the /sysinfo is just everything is just a tag. So if it is a tag, there's no way for you to find out what is that tag all about, right? Because it is just a form, this is just a combination of, alphanumeric. So with the text switch, then it becomes more descriptive, right? You can see exactly what is the description of the tag. It's easier for you to understand. Okay, while HTML is also descriptive and likewise very easy to read, but HTML version is very slow, okay? And resource intensive as well. So what is in sysinfo? Basically, a sysinfo is a collection of multiple advanced URLs. So we say collection, means to say in one single sysinfo file, you will see different types of advanced URL compiled together on a single file, right? And because of that, it is very, very easy for you to examine things because it is in one single location, rather than you have to go through every advanced URL to look for things that you want to look for. All right. Now let's take a look at the files or the information that is contained in your sysinfo. So first up, you have the configuration. Okay. So rather than showing this, let's go ahead and show this to you as a form of demo. Okay. So let's bring up the sysinfo. sysinfo/text. Okay, and let's bump the resolution a bit. Okay, so now what are the information inside of sysinfo? So this is the version 7 of sysinfo. We change it from time to time. And as you can see, this is the advanced URL for this file. So you can, in fact, also do this. So if you paste it over here, right, if you take this advanced URL, right, input this over here, if you take this advanced URL and just put it right there, it is basically the same, right? It is basically the same because sysinfo is a collection of multiple advanced or different advanced URL put in one single file. Okay? So with that, what do you have here? So here, of course, is the version of the sysinfo, the version of the SUS. So on this proxy, we rebooted it 15 hours ago. It's using this time. This is the system time. You have the serial number here, right? So besides the version, you have also the hardware information. Now, one thing to point out here is that the proxy do monitor the hardware of the proxy. So if you are on site, you try to alter the hardware. So let's say you buy a memory from third party or a disk from third party. The proxy using the sysinfo will in fact detect it. Okay, and once detected, it will show unsupported configuration such as this. All right, because of that, it will void the proxy warranty. Okay, so you see here the number of CPU. And you have, this is the drive here, so 2 drives, okay, unsupported because this is, it is expecting to have 1, but you have 2, and expecting to have 1 meg of memory, but you have 2 meg. So 2 disk drives here, you have network cards, so 2 network cards there with 2 has link, and you look at the CPU monitor, it's on right now, so I think I did not turn it off earlier, which you should turn it off, okay, especially after you perform your troubleshooting, okay, and you have your CPU usage, and then you have also your memory statistics. Besides that, if you scroll a little bit, you have your health statistics, okay, so your health statistics tells you about a few things here. So your warning threshold for your CPU utilization, the current value, your memory utilization, your interface utilization also is there. All right. So what else you can see? So that is, another thing I want to show you here, see there's so many information here. The TM statistics that I mentioned to you already earlier, right? This is where you can find it also. So you see the TM statistics are also included in the sysinfo. Okay, so as you can see, this is your linear byte. So where do we use this? We use this to identify if there's any memory leak. So if you scroll down a little bit, you can see here your physical bytes as well. So inside sysinfo, it shows you this as well. Okay, so this is your linear byte. So what you would want to take here is the physical byte. Okay, so this is now your physical byte. This is 1 day. interval. Okay? So what else besides that? Now, this is what I'm going to show you. CLI, show. Okay? So as you can see, your sysinfo also contains the CLI configuration. All right? So this is, in fact, you can say it is a backup of your CLI configuration. If you go to this CLI, as I say, you say show config. The output of this show config is this one inside the sysinfo. Okay? And what else do you have here? Policy. Okay. Let's say if you can find. All right. So let me just search for XML. Okay, so this is, all right, so it takes us here already. Okay, never mind. Let's take a look at this one first because it takes us here. So this is what they think, this is the, so slows down. And again, okay. All right, so this is the event log. So here you can see the configuration, change event. So it is in the sysinfo as well. So this is your event log. Right, what else? This is your, okay, priority 1 event is also inside your sysinfo. Okay, what else? VPM.xml. All right, so likewise, your XML VPM is also here. All right, so your VPM is also in sysinfo. Okay, including your CPL policies are also here. All right, your CPL policies are also there. Your VPM CPL and your VPM XML is also here. Okay, this is your CPL and your VPM XML below. Okay, and your VPM policy is also here. What else? If you have exceptions, all right, are also here. Okay. So what else? So this is what I'm going to show you. So exceptions policy are also there. Storage, statistics. Okay. So remember I told you earlier that in sysinfo you can find out if you have issue with disk. So let's say your proxy is high CPU. You run a CPU monitor. You saw that object caching is using most of your CPU. Okay? So now, you need to find out if you are having issue with the disk. All right? So how would you know? Over here, storage statistics. Okay? Just give me a minute. Okay, so as I was saying, you have a high CPU, you run a CPU monitor, you notice that storage, object store is causing your CPU to go up. So now you want to find out what happened. Because object store is related to the proxy cache. So one thing you need to do is you need to check the storage, whether it is faulty or what. So you can go to this advanced URL /storage statistics, or you can capture the sysinfo, right? Because sysinfo is actually being captured by the proxy. So you can just get that sysinfo from there, or you can go to this /storage statistics. So what would you like to look for inside this advanced URL? So let me show you. So we know we have two disks based on the information earlier we find at the top. This proxy has two disks. So this is this one. If you scroll down, all right, so if you scroll down here, you can see this all zeros. Now, what is this? This is a storage error code. If your disk is healthy, all this would remain 0. If your disk is having issue, like physical issue, bad sectors, for example, then you will see this value increasing. Okay? So what you're going to do? You need to fix that disk. Okay? You need to reinitialize that disk. So this is disk number 1. You just scroll down and you can see the next disk. So now this is disk number 2. Scroll down a bit. Okay? And here, you will see the storage error code for disk number 2. And it looks good as well, all 0. Okay? So that is what you can do to find out for the disk. Okay? Now, another one is the mini context. So let's search for that mini context over here. Or exceptions. I think we need to scroll up. Boom. Oh, okay. So mean context. So here, this core image mini context. It is in the sysinfo also. What is this? Right? This is the one. Right? Core image. So what is this mini context? That's what you just see here. This one. All right, this one. Okay. So basically, that is, it will tell you, if let's say a proxy is rebooting on its own, it tells you what causes it to reboot. So in here, it is a hardware restart exception code. So meaning to say, if there is a value here, it says the restart is due to hardware, software, or restart process description, you can see, and registry content before the restart, and full stop. Most of this is needed by the support to understand why your proxy is rebooting abnormally, okay, because of this code. So it is whether it is due to the administrator rebooting it, it is due to a software exception code, or it is due to hardware exception code. Okay, so this core image, that's what you can see, is needed by the support people to perform troubleshooting. Okay, so next we have a lab for this, exploring sysinfo files. I'm going to stop the sharing. Let me see what we have here. Okay, so we can do this lab now.